Even after tragedies, violent attacks, and massacres, sports have always resumed, and they are undoubtedly our best method of establishing a new normal. In the past, though, sports have been halted for a variety of reasons, some humorous and others more serious. In this video, we'll discuss some of the most memorable sporting interruptions of all time. Make sure you stick with me to the end. Without any further delay, let's get into it. Let's start with when scare interrupted the 1997 Grand National. Not long before the 150th running of the Grand National, organizers were warned twice that there might be a on the racetrack. The event had to be called off, and the 60,000 people who were there had to leave. 2 days later, the race was held again, and Lord Gillen won by a wide margin. Next in our list is the case of an earthquake interrupting the 1989 World Series. In Game 3 of baseball's championship series, the San Francisco Giants and the Oakland Athletics were going head-to-head. Candlestick Park in San Francisco was packed to the brim for the game, which was between the Giants and the Athletics. But just before the game was to start, there was an earthquake. The natural disaster caused panic in the stadium and killed 42 people on the west coast of the United States. The game was played again 10 days later, and Oakland won. This was part of their 4-0 run to the title. Next is that of 1989, where the Hillsborough disaster stopped the FA Cup semifinal. The Hillsborough disaster is still known as one of the worst things to ever happen in sports. Just before the FA Cup semifinal between Liverpool and Nottingham Forest started, the standing-only areas behind one goal were so packed that people had to stand. When the local police handled the situation badly, the walls between the different areas broke down. Some lucky fans got on the field through holes in the fence, but 96 people died and hundreds were hurt. Many of those who died were suffocated by other people. This caused the game to be moved to a new date. Let's talk about the sports interruption in 1968. MLB players force opening day postponement after MLK assassination. After Martin Luther King Jr. was killed on April 4, 1968, the NBA and NHL moved their playoff games, and the country almost came to a stop. However, MLB Commissioner William Eckert did nothing. After the Washington Senators moved their season opener to honor King's funeral, the Cincinnati Reds did the same, and the Pittsburgh Pirates, who had 11 black players in their lineup, were able to cancel their game with the Houston Astros, who didn't want to. Eckert didn't officially move opening day until a few more teams moved their games. Next in the list is the case of cyclists interrupting the Tour de France 1998. After a string of doping scandals that led to the Festina team being kicked out, the 1998 Tour de France was called the Tour du Dopage, as the race turned into a joke and as the riders were upset by how the TVM teams were treated after police raided their hotel. They held their own protest. Riders started stage 17 at a snail's pace, and after 20 miles of racing, they came to a complete stop. Nonetheless, the race resumed and Italian Marco Pantani won the yellow jersey that year. Next is the case of a streaker in the pitch. In 2008, a streaker rushed onto the pitch and toward the players during a one-day international between Australia and India in Brisbane. Not one of his best moves. When the home team's batsman, Andrew Simmons, was at the crease, he gave Robert Ogilvie an unpleasant surprise when he shoulder-charged the streaker and knocked him to the ground. Ogilvie was fined the equivalent of £700 for his mistake, but Simmons didn't get in trouble. A Cricket Australia spokesman said that Simmons was just trying to protect himself, which is something they fully support. How crazy do bees stop sporting activities sound? Well, that's exactly what happened in 2007 when bees interrupted the Sri Lanka vs. England test. On day 4 of the first test in Kandy, England were battling against Kumar Sangakkara and his team when a swarm of bees buzzed into the Asgiria Stadium, causing alarm. All of the players and umpires dropped to the ground and waited anxiously for the swarm to move on. When they did, the game went on, but England lost a hard-fought test. It is not uncommon for a riot or protest to stop an event, as in 1992 when the Rodney King riots affected LA sports. When a Los Angeles jury found that 4 police officers who beat Rodney King badly were not guilty, riots broke out in the city for a week, starting in late April. The Dodgers and Expos moved their series to a later date, and the Lakers and Clippers moved and rescheduled their first-round playoff games. The Clippers played Game 4 of the first round in nearby Anaheim, while the Lakers played Game 4 in Las Vegas. Next up, the 1999 Columbine massacre, which stopped Denver's MLB, NBA, NHL action. On April 20, 1999, 2 seniors at Columbine High School carried out a massacre at the school, taking the lives of 12 students and 1 teacher. Even Colorado's professional sports teams in Denver were affected by the tragedy and its aftermath. The Rockies and the Nuggets had to move their games, and the Avalanche had to play games 1 and 2 of their first-round playoff series in San Jose, even though they were supposed to have the advantage of playing at home. Do you remember the 2001 9/11 attack? It affected sporting activity as it put the MLB NFL on pause. The last month of the Major League Baseball regular season and the second week of the National Football League were both temporarily temporarily halted after the terrorist events that occurred on September 11, 2001. The Fall Classic came to an end in November and baseball play resumed on September 17. Mike Piazza of the Mets hit a late go-ahead home run in the first New York City sports event after resumption, and President George W. Bush threw a first pitch to Derek Jeter at Yankee Stadium before Game 3 of the World Series. Both of these post-attack moments remain in the annals of New York sports and New York history. Sports being interrupted because of a cat in the field. How crazy does that sound? A cat entered the field of play at Anfield during Liverpool's Premier League match versus Tottenham, which resulted in an unusual stoppage of play. The match was being played between Liverpool and Tottenham. The black and white cat walked onto the field 11 minutes into the competition and jumped about joyfully for a minute. It quickly became a craze on Twitter, where a parody account dedicated to the cat has several thousand followers. Next is the 2003 California Cedar Fire that forced the relocation of the Chargers' MNF game. The Cedar Fire, which was one of the most destructive wildfires in California's history, was responsible for the loss of approximately 250,000 acres of land in the San Diego area. The Monday night football game between the Chargers and the Dolphins was scheduled to take place at Qualcomm Stadium in San Diego, but because the stadium had to be used as an evacuation location, the game was moved to Arizona State Stadium in Tempe. Let's now talk about the 2005 Hurricane Katrina that put New Orleans sports in disarray. The horrific Hurricane Katrina, a Category 5 tropical hurricane that struck New Orleans in August 2005 and left hundreds of people dead, brought about significant changes to the local sports environment. In addition to being repurposed as a shelter, the Superdome sustained structural damage that required All Saints home games in 2005 to be played outside of the city. They played those against LSU in Baton Rouge and in the Alamo Dome and San Antonio, respectively. The NBA arena was unable to hold games as well, so the Hornets played their home games in Oklahoma City for the next 2 seasons. Next is the case of the 2008 tornado that altered the SEC's men's basketball tournament. Midway through March of 2008, the SEC basketball tournament was held in the Georgia Dome in downtown Atlanta. However, a tornado caused disruptions to both the schedule and the site of the games. The fourth and final quarterfinal, which was scheduled to take place that night and featured a team from the University of Georgia, were postponed, and the remaining games in the bracket were played at Georgia Tech. As a consequence of this, the Bulldogs were the first team in the history of the competition to play 2 games on the same day and still emerge victorious. Wrapping it up, let's talk about the 2012 Hurricane Sandy that canceled the NYC Marathon. In late October 2012, Hurricane Sandy, a Category 1 storm, caused catastrophic damage to New York City and Long Island. Mayor Michael Bloomberg wasn't sure if the November 4 marathon would go or not, so he decided to postpone it 2 days early. He did this because people were upset that important resources were being given to runners instead of people in need. That concludes today's video. If you found the video helpful, give us a thumbs up, and don't forget to share the video with your friends and family. See you next time.